Welcome back, everybody. As John talked about at the very top of the show, newly declassified documents are confirming what a lot of us suspected all along, that the FBI wasn't just looking at January 6 defendants. They were snooping in on sitting Republican members of Congress of both chambers. According to these documents, Special Counsel Jack Smith actually obtained communication, those records tied to GOP senators and at least one Republican congressman as part of his investigation into President Trump and the events of that day. So joining us now is retired Unit Chief in the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Counterterrorism Division, a legend in his own right, Bassem Youssef. Bassem, thanks so much for being with us.
Great to be with you, Amanda. Thank you very much for the kind remarks.
Well, we so value your opinion. We've had you on this show, and you have weighed in on some very, very important topics. And John described this as grave at the top of the show, and I think that is probably a proper description of what we are seeing right now. I know just before the show you were reading the report. What were some of the top lines for you?
Well, as I mentioned, literally just minutes before John called, I was reading the report, and there are several points that just jumped out at me. The first one is you're talking about members of Congress and the Senate. Those are protected entities. This is one of the things that the media has not really focused on, with all the overhears that were done during the Biden DOJ and FBI on targets. When you talk about members of Congress or college professors or students, those are highly sensitive targets that demand a higher level of predication for getting the authority. And so, to me, the fact that this was done on just the GOP side of the House is already a big flag. The second is that you mentioned in the report that these were declassified reports. First of all, if they were not under the national security side of the House, this would be a criminal. In other words, these individuals, these members of Congress, are not foreign agents, so they would not be subject to the FISA or to the national security letter. In fact, they would be, if they're targets of a phone record authority, it would be done under the Title III or the subpoena. And if that's the case, why was it classified? It's not supposed to be classified. Also, the fact that they only requested records from January 4th to January 7th raises a lot of questions in my mind. That's a very short period in general to be going after someone's phone records or CDRs. They're called detailed records. Those are just a couple of things that jumped out at me, in addition to a whole lot more. The question is, what was the predication that Jack Smith put forth in his affidavit for getting this authority?
Yeah. So for a long time, Bassem, you oversaw the communications analysis units, one of the most important units in using phone evidence to help solve crimes and stop terror attacks and counterintelligence threats. When you see the KAST system, which is the system for, I guess, the tracking the phone calls, walk us through what Jack Smith likely was looking for if he was using the CAST, the KAST system, to figure out what these lawmakers were doing via their phones.
So the name may have changed. I'm not familiar with the KAST in particular, but I believe that that's just a renaming of the tools that we had when I oversaw the unit from 2005 until 2014 when I retired. So there are two, and I can't get into the details of how we actually acquired the data, but I can tell you that we had what I would consider to be toll records on steroids, a tool that would give us access to that kind of data that was not available anywhere else except for the FBI and for the National Security Agency as we work together on these toll records. those are extremely not just sensitive, but very intrusive in terms of the data and the data mining that you would get on the targets. Without, again, going into details, because that would be sources and methods, I can tell you that the program that was most intrusive was the program that was leaked by Edwin Snowden. And that was a program that we also oversaw in the unit during those years that I was overseeing the unit.
The USA program.
Right. And so that program was specifically designed to go after terrorists, and it was a dragnet to see if there are any terrorist connections to known terrorist targets. The fact that it would be used on other than a terrorism target is already abuse of the program. And I suspect if it was used, if the other program that I'm referring to was also used, then that was just as egregious.
Bassem, if they had found something that was of interest to them, something that they thought could damage Donald Trump or damage these Republicans or damage the America First agenda, if they had found something that indeed did damage the way that they wanted to, how would they have presented that to the American people without having to fess up, hey, we snooped on their phone records?
Right. That's a very good question, Amanda. And I go back to 2017 when I also briefed the Hill on how this particular program, without mentioning the name of it, can be used in a manner of where you're reverse targeting the subject. So the way that would work is that you're supposed to approach this program with phone numbers that you know are already bad actors or known targets of a criminal or counterintelligence or counterterrorism matters. And from there, you go and you look at the targets that are in contact with that particular target, and to see if any of those could be associated in a criminal manner with the main target. But you're not supposed to look at it the other way. In other words, you're not supposed to go. And I just to bring this to make a little more sense. I know that in the case of Mike Flynn, General Mike Flynn, when they got his records, it was reverse targeted, meaning they already knew his number. They already knew exactly who he was in contact with. And then they looked for a target that is nefarious and started with that. In other words, pretended that they didn't know that Michael Flynn was actually in contact with that target. So that would be the way, or one way that I could imagine they would try to bring this before the American public.
Yeah, and the reason we don't do that is we don't have general warrants in America. We don't let people go snooping everywhere. You got to have a specific suspicion and allegation that's credible to do it. I want to ask about one thing. What we know from Senator Grassi's letter today, Bassem, is that the FBI was able to give Jack Smith every person that the lawmaker called, where that lawmaker was when they made the call and where the person was when they're making the call. Now, the window between January 4th and 7th would be the window when Congress was preparing to certify the election, which is clearly a function of Congress. It's actually protected by the Constitution. The separation of powers issue here and the level of data that they were actually gathering on lawmakers, does it surprise you that nobody stood up and said, wait a second, Congress had a constitutional obligation to certify the election. Should we be really looking at this data?
John, you literally just answered my question succinctly, the question that I asked earlier. The peculiarity of January 7th through January 4th through January 7th was very peculiar because it's a very short period of time. But the fact that that was the period that you're talking about answers that question, meaning it was already disingenuous that they were looking for records just for that period.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And the location data, the fact that they would know where every person was making the call, plus who they talked to, that would give them a lot of leads and might sweep up innocent people into the sweep, right?
Absolutely. And the fact that they did have that that data, the geolocation, again, that would require a much higher threshold of authority than just a simple national security letter or an admin subpoena. So they must have had some other predication, and if Congress or the investigators would look at that, if DOJ looks at this right now, they will see that there would have to have been false information in that request.
Yeah, it's going to be so important. So many more questions.
Bassem Youssef, you are a national treasure. Your contributions to the FBI and protecting American citizens is unparalleled. Thank you so much for being here, and it's an honor.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you, John.
Absolutely.
Thank you. What a great guy.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be back after these messages.
Yeah. Hey, folks, if you snore and your partner hasn't moved to another room yet, congratulations. You've either found true love or your partner has no other place to go. Let's talk about what your partner really wants in bed. Silence. Stop keeping them awake from your snoring and giving them 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Zepa is the only FDA-approved and patented anti-snoring solution invented by a leading sleep doctor that stops snoring at the source. Zepa has a 91% success rate backed by a 91-night sleep guarantee. That's pretty great. For a limited time, go to Zepa.com and use the code JTN or text JTN to 511-511 and get the absolute best solution, guaranteed, to stop your snoring with a Happy Z Pack and save over 24% off. Plus, Zepa will donate $10 to breast cancer research. Visit Zepa, ZYPPAH.com. Use the code JTN or text JTN to 511-511 and save over 24% off with the Happy Z Pack and start improving your sleep health today. That's a good thing. Remember, Zepa is Happy Z spelled backwards. Text fees may apply.